You walk past someone every day and think you know their story. You see a uniform, a name tag, maybe a mop or a cart of cleaning supplies, and your brain fills in the rest. You think you know who they are, what they do, and maybe even what they're capable of. But sometimes, the most powerful people in a building aren't the ones with offices and business cards. Sometimes, they're the ones you overlook. And this is the story of Denise Atwater. It was 5:47 a.m. when Denise walked into Hallberg International's towering glass building. Same time every day, same quiet nod to security, same gray uniform. While the city was still wiping the sleep from its eyes, Denise was already on the 8th floor, vacuuming around cubicles and empty coffee mugs. She was invisible to most. But not to everyone. "Morning, Denise," mumbled Jeremy from accounting, half awake and fumbling with his bagel. "Morning," she replied with a soft smile, stepping aside to let him pass. No one really stopped to ask how she got so good at her job. How she managed to clean 3 floors faster than most of the team combined. No one knew that every night before she clocked in, Denise helped her granddaughter with her math homework. Or that she translated government forms for her neighbors in the building. And absolutely no one knew that Denise Atwater was fluent in 9 languages. It happened on a Tuesday. Hallberg CEO, James Kellerman, was giving a late tour to visiting executives from Japan. Something about a delayed translator, misprinted schedules, and a conference room double-booked. Denise was just down the hall, wiping down the chrome handles of the restroom door when she heard the awkward silence. One of the executives had asked a question, a complex one about international logistics, and no one understood. Then, like muscle memory, she responded. In flawless Japanese. Every head turned. The translator's eyes widened. Kellerman blinked like he wasn't sure what just happened. Denise stood frozen for half a second, realizing she'd spoken without thinking. Then she quietly added the rest of the clarification, gestured politely, and excused herself with a small bow. No one said anything? Not right away. But the silence? It was louder than anything. That night, after her shift, Denise found a note taped to her locker. A formal envelope. Gold seal. Her name typed neatly on the front. It read, Ms. Atwater. Please join me for coffee tomorrow morning at 9:15 a.m. Office 1201. James Kellerman. She stared at it for a long time. Denise had been working at Hallberg for almost a decade. She'd cleaned every corner of that building, from the executive restrooms to the basement storage. She'd never been to the 12th floor. And she'd definitely never been invited to speak with the CEO. She showed up exactly on time. Her uniform was spotless, hair pulled back tight, hands folded neatly in her lap as she waited in the outer office. The assistant looked at her like she'd taken a wrong turn. But Kellerman? He greeted her with a warm smile. Invited her in personally. Denise, he said, I've heard a lot of languages spoken in this office, but I've never heard someone switch between dialects that fast and that gracefully. Denise said nothing at first. Just nodded, unsure where this was going. I had to ask. He continued. How many languages do you speak? She hesitated, then answered softly. 9. But I'm still working on Turkish. Kellerman laughed, not at her, but out of genuine shock. 9? That's more than anyone on our global ops team. She gave a humble shrug. It just came with life. Grew up in a mixed community. Learned some in school, some from neighbors. Some from necessity. He leaned forward. Have you ever considered a different role here? Something more senior? Her eyes widened. Sir, I clean floors. That's what I've done for years. And that's honorable, he said. But I think your skills go way beyond mops and buckets. What would you say if I offered you a position on our international liaison team? Denise sat there stunned. The words didn't register at first. I don't have a college degree, she finally said. You have something better, Kellerman replied. Lived experience. And the ability to connect with people across cultures in a way no textbook can teach. She didn't say yes right away. Denise wasn't used to opportunities that didn't come with a catch. She wasn't used to being seen. But that night she sat in her tiny apartment with her daughter and granddaughter and told them the whole story. Her daughter grinned through tears. "Mom, it's about time someone saw what we always knew." The next morning, Denise walked back into Hallberg with her shoulders a little straighter. Not because she had a new title. Not yet. But because something had shifted. For the first time, she wasn't just cleaning the building. She was about to become part of building it. When Denise stepped off the elevator on the 10th floor, people stared. Some looked curious. Some confused. A few looked skeptical. It was her first day as a cultural liaison, a role Kellerman personally created for her. She had no corner office, no assistant, and no fancy title. But what she did have: a desk, a badge, and something more valuable than any job title: the CEO's backing. Still, it didn't take long for the whispers to start. "She's a janitor, right? She doesn't even have a degree. I don't get it, why her?" Denise heard it all. Pretended she didn't. Instead, she focused on what she was hired to do: connect, translate, bridge gaps. Her first task? Fix a communication breakdown with a South American vendor. 2 months of stalled emails, misinterpreted terms, and rising frustration. Denise sat in on a call that morning, notebook in hand. When the vendor's representative began speaking rapid Portuguese, most of the room panicked. But Denise? She leaned forward, listened, and then, without missing a beat, responded. In their dialect. Naturally. Warmly. The call that was expected to go off the rails. It ended in laughter. Agreement. A handshake through the screen. Afterward, one of the junior executives turned to her and said, "Wait, what are you?" Denise smiled. Prepared. But not everyone was thrilled about her presence. 3 days in, Denise was walking past the break room when she overheard something sharp. "I don't care how many languages she speaks. She's not one of us. You can't just mop your way into management." It stung. But Denise didn't let it show. That afternoon, Kellerman called her into his office. "You okay?" he asked gently. Denise didn't lie. "It's hard being the question in every room." Kellerman nodded. "Let them question. Just keep giving answers they can't ignore." Over the next few weeks, Denise quietly rewrote the script. She navigated conversations with foreign clients better than the software. She spotted mistranslations in 2 long-standing contracts, one of which had cost the company 6 figures over the years. She didn't brag. Didn't perform. She just delivered, smoothly, confidently, like she'd been doing this her whole life. People started to notice. Not just what she did, but how she did it. She listened more than she spoke. Asked questions no one else thought to ask. And when she spoke in someone's native tongue, she didn't just translate. She made people feel seen. Then came the Morocco delegation. Hallberg had been trying to break into the North African market for almost a year. But the talks kept stalling. Cultural mistrust. Miscommunications. Stiff, formal meetings that never quite landed. Kellerman brought Denise into the next meeting. She didn't dress flashy. Just a soft beige blazer and her usual quiet confidence. She sat at the table. Listened. Waited. And then, in fluent Moroccan Arabic, she introduced herself. The room shifted. You could feel it. People leaned in. Smiled. Relaxed. Because when someone speaks your language, you don't just hear the words. You hear respect. After the meeting, one of the Moroccan partners approached her, quietly touched his chest, a traditional sign of gratitude, and said, "No one's ever done that for us. Not in our language. Not like that." Denise simply nodded. "You matter," she said. "That's all." By midweek, Kellerman made a move that surprised everyone, but said everything. The company's main training room, where every new hire went through orientation, where leaders held workshops, had its nameplate removed. No announcement. No press release. Just a new plaque, The Atwater room. No balloons. No cake. Just a name on the wall. Quiet. Bold. Permanent. That afternoon, Kellerman stood outside the room as a new batch of interns filed in. One of them asked, "Who's that?" A senior staff member replied, "She's the one who reminded us that greatness doesn't always wear a suit." That same day, Denise found an envelope on her desk. No return address. Just her name in neat block letters. Inside was a handwritten note. "I used to think I'd be invisible forever. But today, I stood a little taller because of you. Thank you." No signature. Denise sat there for a long time, holding that note. She didn't cry. She didn't need to. Because that was the moment she realized this wasn't just a job. It was a door. One she had walked through. But not every door stays open without a fight. And someone with power, had just decided to push back. By Thursday morning, word had spread. The Morocco deal was moving again. The Atwater room had become a symbol. And Denise? She was now something more than the janitor who surprised the CEO. She was a quiet force, one some admired, and others resented. That morning, her phone buzzed. An email. Subject, meeting request. From Eleanor Craig, board member, senior executive chair. Time, 3 p.m. Location, 17th floor, executive conference room. Denise exhaled slowly. She'd heard the name. Everyone had. Eleanor Craig wasn't just a board member, she was the board. Old school. No nonsense. The kind of woman who had built her reputation when women weren't allowed to have reputations. But now, she was rumored to be skeptical of Kellerman's changes, especially his newest project. At 2:59 p.m. sharp, Denise entered the small, pristine room. No windows. One long table. At the far end, Eleanor Craig sat with a leather folder and a pen, her reading glasses perched low on her nose. "Have a seat," she said, not looking up. Denise sat. Eleanor tapped her pen twice. "I've reviewed your file," she said slowly. "No college degree. No corporate training. No management certifications. You were a janitor here 3 weeks ago?" Denise didn't flinch. "I was." Eleanor finally looked up. "Help me understand how someone with your background is now overseeing high-level international affairs for a multimillion-dollar firm." Denise leaned forward, her tone calm. "Because I speak the languages. I understand the cultures. I've corrected 2 faulty vendor contracts and cleared a 3-month stall in the Morocco deal. I also secured a verbal commitment from our Brazilian partners. Legal finalizes next week." Eleanor arched one brow. "So, you think this company should be run on instinct and charm?" Denise offered the faintest smile. "No, ma'am. I think it should be run on results." For a beat, Eleanor said nothing. Then she closed the folder slowly, deliberately. "You're a gamble." Denise's voice softened. "I'm used to that. My entire life has been one." Silence. Then Eleanor stood. The conversation was over. But Denise didn't feel defeated. She stood too, nodded politely, and walked out of that room with her spine straight. But when she exited the building, she didn't go back to her desk. She crossed the street, sat on a bench, and stared up at the glass tower where, for years, she'd mopped floors, wondering if anyone saw her. Now they did. And some of them didn't like it. She pulled out her phone and called her daughter. "Hey, Ma," her daughter answered. "Everything okay?" Denise paused. "Yeah. Just needed to hear your voice." "You sure?" "I'm sure." They talked for a few minutes. Nothing serious. Groceries. A movie. Her daughter's dog chewing another slipper. But that small, steadying connection, it was all Denise needed. By the next morning, something strange had happened. Word of the Eleanor Craig meeting had somehow gotten around. Everyone expected Denise to pull back. But she didn't. She arrived early. Spoke at a morning team meeting. Took a call with the German office, without a translator. Handled questions with the calm precision of a veteran. She didn't strut. She didn't show off. She simply stood firm. That afternoon, something even stranger happened. On the whiteboard outside her office, someone had written, "We see you." No name. No signature. Just 3 words that meant everything. Over the next few weeks, Denise became more than just a liaison. People came to her for guidance, advice, even confidence. Interns stopped by with presentation questions. Staffers asked for help crafting messages to global clients. And Denise, she never made anyone feel small. One intern, a shy Vietnamese kid named Bao, once asked, "How did you learn all those languages?" Denise smiled. "One word at a time. Same way you will." She wasn't just changing operations, she was changing the culture. One afternoon, Kellerman joined her for coffee in the break room. "I've been hearing good things," he said casually. She sipped her drink. "Been trying to ignore the bad ones." He chuckled. "You're making waves." She looked at him. "That a good thing?" Kellerman nodded. "Around here, that usually means you're doing something right." He paused. "You know, I've been thinking, we need to start a development program. For internal talent. Especially folks in non-desk roles. There are probably more Denises in this building." She nodded. "There are. They just haven't been seen yet." He looked at her, eyes sharp with intent. "Want to help me build it?" She smiled slowly. "Already started in my head." By month's end, the pilot launched. They called it Voice Inside, a new initiative giving employees across all departments access to language training, leadership mentoring, departmental shadowing opportunities, real pathways to grow. It was Denise's idea. And it caught fire. One HR manager said, "I've been here 9 years and never saw something like this." And it didn't come from a VP. It came from someone who knew what it meant to be overlooked. Denise wasn't looking for fame or attention. She was building a bridge for others to cross. 3 months later, Denise stood backstage at the National Logistics Leadership Summit in Cincinnati. She wasn't a keynote speaker. At first, she wasn't even on the schedule. But word of the Voice Inside program, and the woman who started it, had reached the right ears. She'd been invited to speak, not as a corporate icon, not as a polished executive with a shiny LinkedIn bio, but as herself. When her name was called, she stepped out onto the stage to mild applause. Many in the crowd didn't recognize her. But by the end of her talk, none of them would forget her. She didn't begin with statistics. She didn't recite titles. She told the truth. "I was never just a janitor," she said, standing in the spotlight. "I was fluent. I was capable. I was ready. But nobody ever looked long enough to see it. So I swept the floors. I cleaned the offices. I emptied the trash of people who barely made eye contact. And every day, I listened to voices in languages most people ignored, until one day someone heard mine. The room was silent. So the next time you pass someone without a title, ask yourself, what are you really missing?" When she stepped off stage, the applause was thunderous. Not polite. Not routine. Real. A young man in the crowd approached her, tears welling in his eyes. "My mom's a housekeeper," he said quietly. "She speaks 5 languages. I used to be embarrassed to tell people that." Denise gently touched his arm. "Don't ever be ashamed of where you come from. The only thing to be ashamed of is staying blind to brilliance." He nodded, overwhelmed. For Denise, that moment mattered more than any plaque or office. When she returned, things had changed, again. Interns started leaving sticky notes on her door. "You gave me courage. Thank you for listening. I want to be like you, not just smart, but kind." A mid-level supervisor, newly promoted through the Voice Inside program, walked up to her one morning and said, "I used to think I had to act like someone else to get ahead. But you showed me I can bring me to the table." She wasn't just mentoring. She was rewriting the script. Later that quarter, C.O. Kellerman called her in. Got a question for you, he said, smiling. She raised an eyebrow. Another summit? No. Bigger, he said. He slid a document across the table. Director of Global Communication Strategy. The title was long, but the job was simple. To help this company speak to the world, the way only she could. She stared at it for a long moment. You know I've never managed a department, she said softly. Kellerman nodded. True. But you've managed something better, change. She signed the paper without hesitation. Because this wasn't about ambition. It was about alignment. Her story had finally found the space it belonged in. The new office came with a window. A view. A nameplate. But Denise didn't change. She still visited the break room. Still said good morning to every intern. Still spoke to the janitorial team, in their languages, their stories, their tones. Because she hadn't climbed out of something. She'd climbed with it. Every mop bucket, every overnight shift, every whispered phone call with her daughter. It had all built the woman in the glass office with the soft voice and the steel spine. Here's what we forget. Talent doesn't always wear a suit. Brilliance doesn't need a fancy title. And sometimes, the most valuable voice in the room is the one nobody bothered to hear. Denise Atwater didn't demand the spotlight. She didn't lobby for respect. She earned it, one quiet moment, one translated contract, one intern conversation at a time. She proved that potential isn't limited to resumes. It lives in lived experience, unseen effort, and quiet resilience. Final voiceover, direct to camera. If you've ever been overlooked. If you've ever been told to stay in your lane. If you've ever been underestimated just because of your title, your clothes, your accent, or your silence. Keep going. Because one day, someone will see you. And when they do, don't just take your seat at the table. Bring extra chairs.